Unshelling Medicine Podcast. Healthcare in the language we understand.
Welcome to Okay. Hi, Gary. I have Gary Phipps with me today. Gary is the guy. And we are going to talk about a myriad of things, very interesting things. It is going to span his career in the military, and we thank him for his service. His general outlook on certain things that, society, especially in the United States, kind of have varied opinions on. And we are going to have a very hearty discussion. So, buckle up. Gary, you ready?
I'm ready.
I
Let's do
love
this.
it. So, Gary, tell us about your experience in the military and also that transition into civilian life. How was that like for you?
Yeah, every soldier, every airman, every Marine that transitions out of the military has different experiences, and you can prepare for it in a number of ways. But I guess I'll start from the beginning. I joined the Army, I think I was 19, had just turned 19, and I didn't really know what I was doing with my life, just like a lot of guys that join the military. The prospect of having college paid for by the military was nice and everything. But more than anything, I wanted just to get away from home and kind of become a different version of myself and go on an adventure, see the world, and do something exciting. And I've had family members who have served in the military, so that was kind of a driving factor too. But really, I just didn't really have a goal, and I knew I needed discipline. I knew I needed something to kind of shake things up. So going off on my own for the first time was exciting. I ended up going to basic training at a Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I was initially an artilleryman. But I had airborne in my contract, so that means I had to go to Fort Benning, Georgia for airborne school, and that involved jumping out of airplanes. And I don't know if you've ever seen the TV HBO series Band of Brothers before.
Yes.
But Band of Brothers, was modeled after that airborne unit in World War II. And after watching that, that's really kind of what drove me to want to go airborne. So I went to airborne school, and that was an experience jumping out of airplanes for the first time, especially loaded down with combat gear. But then I ended up getting stationed after training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I was there for a number of months before my first deployment to Iraq. President Bush at the time did a thing called the Surge, where basically he flooded Iraq with tons of troops to help squash a lot of the terrorist activity and stuff that was going on. And I was there for 15 months, my first deployment. So it was quite a long deployment. Iraq, especially Baghdad, is a crazy place, as a lot of my brothers and sisters in arms can attest to. It's an interesting place, a dangerous place, but an experience nonetheless. After that, went back to Fort Bragg, ended up getting married to my wife, ended up deploying again. I think I went to Haiti first for the earthquake response in 2010. I was there for about 6 weeks. It was refreshing to go to a place where people weren't trying to shoot you. They actually generally Americans, which was cool. And it was nice to see Haiti, even though the place was
Yeah.
really in bad shape after the earthquake. And then I ended up going back to Iraq one more time for about 9 months. And that was, I won't say relaxing, but that was a less intense
Okay.
deployment. Whenever I came back to the States after that, and some time at Fort Bragg, and then I ended up getting put on recruiting orders, and I ended up getting sent back home to my town of Alton, Illinois, where I was an Army recruiter for a couple of years before I got out of the Army. So yeah, that's kind of my military experience in a nutshell anyway.
Thank you. We thank you for that service. And yeah,
No,
the
thank you.
earthquake in Port-au-Prince was very devastating, life lost. And in times like that, even when people are experiencing a very devastating scenario, there's a certain group of people who have a way of still remaining thankful and grateful. And that is great that you had that experience, even with the relief efforts that you were there for.
Yeah.
So transitioning into civilian life, what were you expecting and did it meet your expectation?
Uh,
At least
it
initially, or was it like kind of a culture shock?
well, that's one thing I think me being an Army recruiter
Okay.
helped with, because beforehand I always tell people Fort Bragg, North Carolina, it's the home of the Airborne and Special Operations. And living on Fort Bragg is like living in a different world. It's its own city. I always compare it to modern day Sparta. Like,
Mm.
Spartan soldiers and how they used to live. They had their own traditions, that warrior mindset. That's really what Fort Bragg is like when you live on there. You see groups of men every morning running down the street singing songs about killing the enemy. And then right next door to that, you have a grade school with kids playing outside hearing these songs. Everybody's raised in this environment, so it's very different.
Yeah.
Now, I can imagine transitioning from an environment like that straight to a civilian office life would have been much more jarring. But because I was an Army recruiter, I was able to assimilate more into the local community as a soldier and kind of ease into that a little bit more to help get me out of that mindset. And I think that helped quite a bit. Getting out of the military, especially with a combat MOS like I had, I ended up being a Cav Scout at the end. That doesn't really translate so well into civilian life. Knowing weapons, knowing how to call for fire with artillery, and things like that, reconnaissance, that doesn't really translate so well. So I had a couple of ideas of what I might do. I didn't know if I was going to go law enforcement. I didn't know if I was going to do park service. I really wanted to do something with the gun still, just because I know firearms so well. But little did I know, I had kind of a business personability side to me that I was unaware of. And so, me getting hired on as a technical recruiter in St. Louis kind of opened my eyes and also made me realize there was more money in that than there is walking around with a gun doing other things. I can always shoot on
Right.
my own time, but making money for my family is obviously a
Right.
priority.
I would agree. So your business side, did it surprise you that you had that people skill, for recruitment and
Yeah.
for lack of a better words?
Yeah. I've always been outgoing and like and whenever I was younger, I was a super hyper kid. I was never shy, but I didn't realize that skill could translate into just being able to talk. Because I've talked to so many people, and I experienced that some too, I guess, as an Army recruiter, having to talk to parents, ease their mind about certain jobs that their kid might be looking at. Just being able to talk to people is truly a skill that a lot of people either avoid or they just don't have. And fortunately, I seem to have it to some extent, I think.
You do have it, and it's great. It's a skill that most people don't have, and when you do have it, I think it's great to put it to good use.
Yeah, yeah. It can be used for bad too,
That's
but
why else.
yeah.
That's why it's it's good use, right? Going back to the recruiting, we're still talking about your transition into civilian life. What was the most difficult part of as an army recruiter talking to parents about their children's career choice to go into the military, um, and also maybe concerns that they may have?
Yeah, so that's a dilemma, and that's also a reason why a lot of people have it's popular to not like Army recruiters across the board, just because you have parents. Yeah, you have parents who are very like, if you come up to their door knocking or you give them a call, they'll say, "Don't call back here. Leave my kid alone. I don't want them joining." Like, they think you're just trying to take their baby away from them, and I understand that. But one thing I told myself whenever I became an Army recruiter was, I'm not going to be a lying Army recruiter, because that's also a common thing. A lot of people think, oh, the Army recruiter is going to promise you the world, and then you're going to end up, sleeping in a ditch or getting shot at, and, they're going to trick you basically.
Mhm.
And I always told myself morally, I'm not going to do that. Now, the Army does need combat people that are meant for it. I wanted to do that. So that's one thing I wanted. So while I was an Army recruiter, I tried to identify those kids that would do well in that and others that should be doing something else, whether it be because of their intelligence. I mean, you have to take an ASVAB test score to qualify for certain jobs in the Army. And some kids would score very high and they would tell me, I want to go special forces or I want to do this. And I would look at them trying to assess the type of person that they are, and I would try to point them in a direction that they would be more successful in. And I did help a number of people. I still have some people that joined the Army, they got out of the Army. Their parents still stay in contact with me to this day. They tell me, hey, thank you so much for guiding them in that direction. And that for me is proof in the pudding that I stuck to my word with that. Now, I'm not going to say I was the best Army recruiter. I didn't break any record numbers, but then again, I don't think you're going to break any record numbers and be honest at the same time.
Right. That is integrity, and that is a people skill that you've managed to put to good use. So, in your civilian life, when you really got into the civilian world, how quickly did you realize that certain careers were not for you?
Well, it was really trial and error. After being an IT recruiter for a while, the aspects of it were cool. Coming into work in a tie, going to fancy parties, stuff like that.
Right.
That was all nice and dandy, but the cutthroat
Yeah.
nature of IT recruiting and staffing just really wasn't something that I wanted to stick around in for a career, even if the money was good. And then after leaving there, I was like, I'm gonna try something new. Ended up getting into marketing. It was in the trucking industry. Um, anybody that's worked in the trucking industry can tell you its own thing, and I am not a fan of that either. However, I do love marketing, like social media. I like advising the company on which direction it should go, merging technologies that could be advantageous to their hiring needs or their overall marketing, and that was fun because that it allowed me to leverage technology and social
Right.
engineering into one thing, and that taught me a lot, and gave me experience in that professional realm. But then again, I found working with people, just like recruiting, can be challenging because people don't listen. They don't always take your advice, and you're at the end of the day, you're at the leadership's whim, and if they're not going to adapt or change, you just got to move on. And also, it was a long commute. I wasn't a big fan of that, driving through St. Louis traffic every morning 2 times, being on the road at least 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
So that wasn't fun. After I left there, I ended up becoming a drone pilot for my current company out of Texas. And this job has probably been the most rewarding out of all the jobs that I've had since I've gotten out of the military, just because it's a balance of everything. I get a nice balance of staying at home, traveling, technical work, field work, dealing with clients, and also being alone a lot of the time. So I really can't complain right now, and I don't see myself leaving anytime soon.
Love it. So tell us about this drone company and what you do that has afforded you this balance. I know a lot of companies in the recruitment effort talk about work-life balance. And it sounds like
Hmm.
you're working for a company that has enabled you to have that balance of spending time with family and also utilizing your not only people skill but also your technical skill. So tell us about this and what
Yeah.
you do.
Well, the company is Smart Drone. They're based out of Tyler, Texas, and they were a startup company. I guess we've semi recently became no longer a startup,
Right.
but they started during COVID in 2020. In that you would think, oh, that's a terrible time for a company to start a
Usually that's
business,
the
and
best time to start when everybody's crazy.
I don't think they intended for that to be the case, but that was the year that they started. And they started out as a drone manufacturing company. And I don't know if you know, but a lot of drone companies are not US based. Most drone companies are overseas. And that creates a lot of challenges for government and state companies, or even state organizations, to utilize those drones
Oh,
because they're made in competing countries like China and places like that. So with us being a US based manufacturer, we're able to do more work and kind of ease the worries of these companies that are like, we want to make sure you don't have any technology on your drone that is going to get sent to our enemies, basically. But yeah, they started in Texas and they were mainly doing local work. And then they ended up bringing me on as kind of a Midwest representative. So my job basically is to spread the good word of Smart Drone to local companies here around the St. Louis area and the greater Midwest. And it's evolved over time to where now I'm going out to the East Coast. So I'm kind of in charge of everything east of the Mississippi, really, as far as services go. Surveying companies, engineering companies, they have large scale projects that would normally take them a lot of time to do. They give me a call and I get out there, I fly the site for them, and we provide the data to them so they can complete their projects quicker.
beautiful. What kind of large scale projects are we talking about? Because if we're talking about industries, I would like anybody who's listening to us today who may have a need, but maybe wonder if your company does work in their industry? Like, what kind of large scale project are we talking about, Gary?
Yeah, that's going to be more so, I would say, large scale surveying. Let's say there's a piece of property that's going to be turned into a residential area. They plan on building a bunch of new houses there. Before any building can happen on that, surveyors have to get a digital map created for the builders to plan off of. And before they can do that, they have to get elevation differences. Now, traditionally, surveyors would use these GPS sticks. They would walk around the entire site and take check shots or GPS shots on individual points. And that'll create a digital map that shows the rise and flow of the elevation. Now, with the invention of LiDAR and drone technology, we're able to fly that entire site. And instead of taking sparse shots throughout the entire site, it's almost like a blanket being laid over the terrain. And that gives much more detail to the developers and to the engineers for their planning. And that basically makes their job so much easier and saves a lot of time.
It is beautiful. So, in um in a case where I'm very passionate about land and farming. So in a case of a farming community, if somebody has a potential purchase of, say, acreage, we're talking maybe 100 and above, to potentially plan for agriculture, not necessarily building.
Yeah.
Is this something that your company can help a person establish?
Yeah. We've worked with agriculture companies before. They do a lot of what they call floodplain studies. They have irrigation problems that exist on certain farms that they need to figure out. And by being able to fly that and give them, there's different deliverables that you can give to these clients that they can use in specific programs. But being able to fly it, we can really show them where the lowest elevation on a site might be, where they need to pay attention to, where water might need to drain off of a farm field in order to give more farming area so they can produce more crops. So there's really a lot of different applications for LiDAR besides surveying and agriculture. I mean, it's been used. You can see any of these TV shows out there where they'll fly drones over the Amazon jungle and they're discovering where hidden temples are just by looking from that LiDAR data, and they can uncover archaeological sites and all kinds of stuff. So it's really exciting, the different applications that LiDAR can bring to really almost to every industry.
Beautiful. So I know you just said the company is no longer a startup because of maybe the reach and the amount of customers they've been able to acquire over time. So you are responsible for the East Coast. Is the company still very small? Are they looking to recruit people who are, say, drone pilots? Because we talked about the certification before we actually got on the call. So are they looking to recruit more people for different areas as the company continue to grow? Oh, okay.
Eventually, yes. Now, I can't speak, I guess, for my company owner right at this
Right.
moment, but I know in the future the ultimate goal would be to expand across the entire
Okay.
country. Smart drones. We call ourselves the USA Drone Company, just because a lot of those drone companies are made overseas. And we want to kind of be that go-to US drone manufacturer and service provider pretty much in every major city across the US. Like right now, we do have a nationwide reach, but it'd be nice if we had more people like myself sprinkled across so I don't have to do so much driving.
I mean, you get to spend your alone time, when you need to driving.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I get to listen to a lot of great podcasts.
hello. So let's talk about safety. Spending time alone driving, going to fly these drones over large geographical area. And when you're doing this with a group of people, or are there times where you are by yourself? We're talking about dense
Hmm.
first bush. We're dealing with
Yeah.
wild
Yeah.
multi-story. So how is that set up for you when you're out there with your drone?
Yeah, so a lot of my work and a lot of drone mapping is done almost
Mm,
autonomously, meaning we pre-program into the drones the area that it needs to fly. And really, it doesn't take a whole lot of finesse on the pilot's end to
okay.
fly the site because you do all the settings beforehand in the program. And nine times out of 10, it's by myself. Now, sometimes if it's a very large site that it would make more sense to use more pilots on, or if it's a complicated site in a tricky environment, we might bring another person on to help out. But most of the time, it's just myself. And you'll launch the drone from a safe launch point. The drone will reach its altitude, and after you've verified there's no obstacles like towers or anything that the drone's going to hit, the drone just kind of does what it does. It'll start doing its paths back and forth on the site. It'll have to land for battery
Okay.
change. You launch it back up again, and it completes the site. And then once it's done, it returns home automatically by itself and then lands right where I'm at. So safety is kind of built into it. It takes out a lot of
Okay.
user error, which is 9 times out of 10 what the cause of drone incidences are. That's people crashing into something because they're flying around, running into a power line pole or something like
Mm.
that. But being a Part 107 pilot, ensuring that your drone doesn't hit anything, and doing proper planning beforehand is really the key to safety in piloting drones.
And is that something that the certification hones in on? So for any, say, leisure drone, pilot who wants to go to the commercial side of things, is the safety aspect and mapping something that the licensure helps people kind of like, hone in on?
So, yeah, I would say the Part 107 doesn't really focus so much on LiDAR mapping or mapping in general.
Okay.
It mainly focuses on just being in the air, and general drone safety. I had a conversation a little while back with somebody on LinkedIn who was talking about there's a lot of licensed drone pilots out there that are struggling to find work,
Mhm.
and they were discussing the reasons why that might be the case. And one of the main cases was lack of specialty in an area, whether that be LiDAR, whether that be photogrammic processing. Because a lot of people are just like, oh, I can get a drone and have a camera on it and find work. Well, there's real estate that you can get into that utilizes a lot of
Right.
that. But nowadays, a lot of those real estate agents are drone pilots themselves. So they don't even have to hire anybody. They'll just pop it up themselves and get the shot that they need. So really being specialized in an area of drone work is probably the biggest key for finding work. I was lucky enough to have fallen into a company that was willing to train me into LiDAR work, which there are companies like that. You can always teach a new skill. You can't teach competence, I guess, as a
Right.
pilot. So getting lucky, putting yourself out there, making sure your resume shows your drone Part 107 skills and that you're open to it, and reaching out to companies saying, hey, I'm a Part 107 pilot. I wanted to give you my resume in case you are hiring in the
Right.
future. And that's being personable and a little bit of luck.
Luck goes a long way, but you prepare.
It
So
does.
when luck shows up, you're ready. So that was a very important aspect because there are people out there selling courses. All you need is just to buy my course and take your licensure, and you should be good to make all this money as a drone pilot. But specializing is very important because I can remember when we were
Yeah.
purchasing a home, people will come out to do like an inspection
Yeah.
for the roof and all those things. He was a drone pilot. He brought his own drone. He needed to know the age of the roof and all the other stuff that was not
Hmm.
seen. So specializing and having that part of a business has now become a trend where even realtors, like you say, they don't have to hire a
Yeah.
drone pilot. So decide your niche down. A wide net doesn't always catch all the fish. Niche down, specialize and find a company that is willing to train you. So that was a good tidbit. So let's talk about safety for you. I know before we were on the call, we
Yeah.
talked about you possibly being out in my area and at a time where bears are just waking up from hibernation and about safety. And that conversation led us to like Second Amendment conversation.
Hmm.
Please, can you just highlight some of the safety that you implement for yourself in cases like that where you can actually face danger in a dense rush?
Yeah, I would say travel everywhere I travel, I have what I call a get home bag.
Okay.
So basically, it's a giant hiking bag with items that I've used throughout my military career and my civilian life. I consider myself somewhat of an armchair prepper. I've used a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
in the field over the recent years. I've mainly kind of just been figuring out what I need to have on me for practical uses, which is a get home bag. So if I'm traveling hundreds of miles away from home, and let's say a major disaster happens and I got to get home to my family, what do I need to have with me to get home? You got to have water, you got to have purification, you got to have batteries, communication things. And also, and unfortunately, in today's world, you got to have a firearm. And so I make sure and have one with me everywhere I travel. And even whenever I'm at home, that's also the case, especially if my family's with me. If my family's traveling, I'm going to want to be able to defend them by any case, by any means whatsoever. So I'm a huge proponent on the Second Amendment side, but more than the Second Amendment, just common sense. Everybody has the God-given right to protect
Yeah.
themselves, regardless of what laws say. I refuse to be kind of, I guess, caught with my pants down in dangerous situations. And I think being in dangerous situations in places like Iraq has showed me that so many times. I was in a really sketchy area
Yeah.
where I'm like, man, I'm really glad I have a gun right now, just for safety. And that alone gives you peace of mind. Like I was saying earlier, it's a deterrence to would be attackers, would be criminals that know, hey, maybe this isn't the guy I want to mess with right now.
Right. I mean, it goes without saying. And given that the Second Amendment is something that I don't want to call it controversial, but it kind of sort of is in some aspect. And it
Hmm.
does the varied opinions on it. I'm a believer. Second Amendment is the Second Amendment, and there should be common sense behind it. Everybody has
Hmm.
a right to protect themselves. However, we should have a stopgap of sort where there's a bit of investigation into if a person can or cannot or is fit to because somebody in the healthcare system I see how things can escalate very quickly and how important it is to
Hmm.
make sure that the right people are having access to certain things. A weapon is a weapon. Anybody can turn anything into a weapon. It's not about the weaponizing of things. Is about,
Hmm.
am I willing to give this much um, firepower, in a sense, to somebody who may not necessarily use it in a responsible fashion? And responsible is defending your family, defending yourself, not going on a rampage, like unfortunately has
Hmm.
become a thing in our country. So, Gary, what do you say on that?
Yeah, I would say the mental health aspect has been the main driver behind all the bad things that have been associated with guns. And uh, I would say a lot of the effort and funding that's put into maybe combating guns themselves should be directed more towards mental health research and how to improve that process of identifying those people who maybe shouldn't have a gun. I would say it almost is on the same lines as having a driver's
Mm,
license. So let's say you're a person who's been convicted of reckless driving 100 times. Well, they're going to
yeah,
revoke your license because obviously you can't be trusted to have
yeah,
a car anymore, which is also a
yeah,
deadly weapon. The same thing I think should be applied to owning a gun. If you've been shown to have violent criminal aspects, then maybe you shouldn't have one at that point. Now, that also raises a question of what's the point of jail? Is it meant to rehabilitate? Are you still
right,
a citizen after you get out? So if you're still a citizen, shouldn't you still be afforded, if you're rehabilitated, to own a firearm? So that brings into question, should prisons be focusing more on rehabilitating more than
exactly,
punishing? And so that trickles into the gun realm just as much as I think
yeah,
mental health does. So I'm almost, and it may not be the right answer, I'm almost more on the side of everyone should be trusted with the firearm until proven otherwise, because that is our right as US citizens.
yeah. I hear you. That is a great point. However, um, I am not going to agree that everybody should be trusted if there's a history of distrust. Your
Yes.
history, yes.
Yes.
If you have a history that raise questions, if that red flag comes up, I'm not pushing
Hmm.
it down. I'm going to take a look at it. Like you
Hmm.
mentioned, a car accidents kill a lot of people, and because of reckless driving. and because
Mhm.
of substance abuse and
Mhm.
operating a vehicle. It creates very devastation year after year, day after day. So if a person has a history of, say, serious mental health concerns, and there's a history talking about rehabilitation, that is such a deep conversation that is
It
going
really
to
is.
be another episode. That conversation, the prison system is meant to rehabilitate people back into society. That's why certain organizations have the returning citizens retraining or training program, right? Just like, veterans who come back from war and transition into civilian life. Prison
Yeah.
system is more punitive than it is
Mhm.
rehabilitative.
Rehabilitative.
So
Yeah.
recently, we've had organizations that have volunteered or gotten contracts to go into the prison system to help with education, re-education, I should say, to help with skills, training, and to help with different aspects of getting people ready for release. It never used to be right.
Mm.
And not every
Yeah.
prison has that or has programs of sort. There are people who commit crimes that were either self-defense or just, situational in nature. That is very different from what we term in society as career criminals. Okay.
Mhm.
So in evaluating if a person, like you said, everybody deserves, because it's our right, it's a Second Amendment right to have access to purchase a gun. Everybody has that right until you prove you cannot be trusted with it. So in this
Mhm.
scenario, if a crime was committed based on a situation, okay, or self-defense, and somebody who has a history of assault, a history of assault of different, very recent patterns, I should say, against women, sexual in nature, or physical assault, or even murder.
Yeah.
So we have two presenting case. You have a history of doing all this extra stuff, and you have one history of doing something that, yes, maybe it was self-defense, but it still broke the law. Or maybe situation,
Mhm.
no, but it still broke the law. However, you have a history of being an upstanding citizen. So should we treat you exactly the same? I would say no.
Yeah. No, I
Right.
agree with you. I'm very against blanket laws when it comes to really anything. And I would love it if our country would go back to more of a local judgment court system. Because if you look at, like, okay, me and my wife's been watching Cops, the TV
The
show,
old cops
quite a
movies.
bit, just rewatching. Oh yeah, we're watching all of them. But while we're watching them, it's funny because you can see some of the police officers when they run into some of these
Right.
individuals, they've ran into them multiple times. They've arrested them multiple times. Now, if I was a local judge at a court and I know this person, I've seen the suspect multiple times. I think it should be up to that court on their ability to purchase firearms either permanently or for a while or whatever it might be. I think each case should be looked at individually by a local governing body that
Right.
knows them. Because if you have a cop that's run across them multiple times and they have multiple witness accounts of them being crazy out in this
Right.
public, violent, you obviously see a record that should be looked at as, okay, hey, even though you don't have a felony or something like that, maybe you shouldn't own a firearm, or at least be able to buy one until you undergo a psychiatric evaluation and be deemed safe for it. And that's why I don't like blanket laws, because I think some people who should be allowed to own a gun might get steamrolled by that. And that's not fair to them and their
Right.
rights. But also at the same time, we need to make sure we're identifying the actual people who are a danger.
And you're right about that blanket. Anything doesn't work for anybody. Using a brush paintbrush doesn't work for anybody. However,
Hmm.
if a person has a relationship with the local police department, and also to speak on the other side, there are police departments that are not fair. The police department that
Hmm.
targets certain people. So if you actually commit a crime, you were not framed for anything, you actually committed a crime that was proven, the case should be looked at very differently when it comes to somebody having access to a firearm, being able to be licensed to carry a firearm. Like you stated earlier, a criminal doesn't care whether they have access or not. If they want to obtain one, they can obtain one. So this is where
Yeah.
When one state is trying to do its best to curtail things in a sense of responsibility, and others are like, it's
Mhm.
candy, free for all, come one, come all.
Yeah,
It,
yeah, yeah.
criminals are going to find a way to get to come one, come all, and come to a state where people are trying to, on a local level or state level, try to kind of like curtail this behavior because of that intimate relationship that has established in the state
Mhm.
for individuals. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of work to do in that regard. But also, we have to have programs that help rehab people coming back from, say, a sentence, after serving a sentence, I should say, or in the society in general, having more programs to cater to the needs of people with either diagnosed or almost diagnosed mental disorder.
Mhm.
There are no when there's no program or treatment patterns or interventions, things do go haywire. And I think that is what, as a
Yeah.
society, we are suffering when we hear about all this mass shootings and very unfortunate events,
Mhm.
really.
Yeah. Well, one thing too, just a caveat on that is one important thing I think I consider myself, I'm neither left or right. I consider myself more of a
Okay.
libertarian. And besides that, I'm just a fan of freedom overall. But one thing that the Second Amendment discussion needs, especially for a lot of people to understand, is what's the purpose of the Second Amendment? Now, some people will say it was
Right,
for hunting. Some people will say, some people say it was for
right.
self-defense. I disagree with both. The purpose of it is to protect individual liberty and to prevent government tyranny. And that is a huge factor that people take out of the equation when we're having these discussions. Now, some people say, well, that's old school think, but it's really not. If it's legal, governments will do it and governments will take
Right.
advantage of it. So, a country, and this has happened multiple times throughout history, countries have slowly slid into a tyrannical state where they start taking advantage of their citizens' liberties. And over time, especially after guns are banned or restricted to the point only the elite or wealthy can own them, that gives the average everyday people no way to protect their freedoms or at least fight back. And a lot of people don't like talking about it, especially politicians, because when politicians start talking about fighting a tyrannical government, they get bombarded by other politicians saying, "Are you trying to start an insurrection?" No, I'm trying to prevent one. I'm trying to prevent a need for one. And so many other countries out there look at America as almost we're the Alamo. We're the Alamo for freedom. And I always tell people, well, the reason why that is because we have our
Mm,
guns. Who's going to invade us? So many politicians were saying, why don't we send guns to Ukraine to help them out? Let's arm the citizens so they can fight against this government trying to attack them. So you understand the version of why the Second Amendment's important now. I mean, like having that amount of guns is it's almost an insurance policy for our freedoms. And when they get eroded to the point where we can't use them anymore, I think that becomes a
yeah.
problem.
Too much of everything is not good either. Everything in
Oh yeah.
balance, because we are going into a space where there's almost an obsession with collecting, having a few, having two. You can shoot two at the same time. Having 10. How are you going to shoot all 10? So we've gone into like the collecting mindset. And other countries looking at the United States as Alamo because we are all gone to the two and just spewing all over the place. Yes, it can be effective when it comes to government takeover. But we have this is 2025 for whoever is listening, we have in just 2024, December to January of 2024, we have seen two governments, right, where citizens stood up without being armed to the tooth against something that was basically disintegrating into tyranny. Right? Korea was one, and then France. Right? These are countries,
Mm,
guns are not the mainstay, but the voices and the actions of the citizens said, absolutely not. We're not doing that. We are absolutely not doing that. Not here. Cut it out. And the people were called out and, they were basically taken out. So there are other ways that we can exert our authorities as free citizens without it always having to come with firepower. Firepower does help because you know what? Our military is very, very heavily weaponized, like you know. The military is heavy. Not to say that other countries don't have enviable artillery. I'm not saying that at all. But when it comes to standing up and fighting for everybody's right equally, I think other countries have American beat by that because we're very divided. We're divided because sometimes we're blinded by so many things, especially along the racial lines and sometimes along the socioeconomic lines as well.
Hmm.
And like you said, it would be crazy if only the elite had access to guns and not everybody else.
Hmm.
No, everybody
Hmm.
and their mama in America has access to guns, including people that shouldn't. So, where do we healthily manage one another or manage the access and the freedom, quote unquote, freedom we have
Yeah.
without being self injurious?
Yeah. No, and I've thought a lot about this. And a big topic that comes into mind is, let's say,
Right.
Australia. So Australia ended up enacting some gun laws where people, only certain farmers can have shotguns for certain reason and things like that. But an important thing to realize is population size.
Okay.
So Australia has the population size of Los Angeles. So with that being said, a population that size is much easier to control and to enact gun control with a country the size of the United States, vast more people, and the amount of firearms that the United States has beats the top like 5 countries together
See?
in the world. So at this point, there's no way to get rid of guns in the US. That realistically, in my opinion, will never happen without mass bloodshed and
Right.
war. But if America has that many guns and we have as few gun related violence as we do comparative to the amount of guns that we own, that I think speaks for itself on the majority of gun owners. So, like, for me personally, I own more than 3 guns. I wouldn't call it a collection, but I also have a purpose for each one that I own. Has
You have
any
a
of my
military
guns?
when you're talking, you have
Yeah.
a military background.
Yeah.
Let's put that on the table. These are your babies.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So regular civilians who have prongs.
Yeah.
What are we fighting?
Okay. I would say where I live in rural America, I have a lot of farmer buddies. I have a
Okay.
lot of friends who are they're just gun enthusiasts. Let's just say
Okay.
that. I have one buddy who's
That,
a mechanic. I have a buddy who's a mechanic who owns probably 20 times the amount of guns that I do. Now, he's a very smart guy, never committed a crime a day in his life, but
mhm.
he looks at his guns how a golfer might look at his multiple golf clubs. And instead of going to the driving range, he goes to the shooting range. And that's what he likes to use his guns for. So I don't think necessarily owning a lot of guns is a problem at all. Now, it would be if you didn't properly secure them.
Okay.
Because let's say a criminal breaks into your house, then they have an access to a plethora of guns. But I don't think the hobby in itself attributes to the actual mental health violence aspect of the gun debate, I
It does
guess.
not. It does not. And please don't get me wrong.
No, I'm not.
The people that collect beanie dolls, what are you going to do? 50
Oh,
million
yeah.
beanie? You don't just collect them. The people that collect what?
Yep.
Ceramic plates. The people that collect pencils, sharpeners, erasers.
Hmm.
It's a collection. Everybody's passionate about whatever
Hmm.
they're passionate about, and there's nothing wrong with that. And like you said, a smart man never committed a crime as opposed to going to whatever range he goes to the shooting range. That is his
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Not for me to judge the man if he hasn't committed a crime, whatever. But we're talking
Yeah.
about a natural fear of, yeah, I have to stock up on all this Zuka and yeah, on
Oh,
the
yeah.
chill out.
Yeah, there's crazies on both sides to
Right.
be for sure. I follow a lot of those prepping shows and they're like, we're preparing for Armageddon. You can take it too far that way for sure. But even those people aren't committing gun violence in cities that have the strictest gun laws. Like let's take
Right.
Chicago. Like Chicago, for
Right.
instance, the strictest gun laws in the country, but yet the highest gun
Why,
violence rate almost.
why is that, Gary? Let us dissect it. Why is that? Why? No.
I think it's
Why is that? Where are they getting it from? If it's the strictest. Let's talk about the neighbors that
yeah.
don't have strict laws. So is anything to be
Mm-hmm.
smuggled? When you talk about crime and a person who maybe has committed
Yeah.
crime majority of their lives, they're going to find a way, right? The same
Mm-hmm.
people can bypass security systems and get into people's homes. It's my home. Why are
Yeah.
you so invested in bypassing my security system? Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Way
Yep.
people hack other people's security system to like ransom.
Mm-hmm.
A criminal is going to always find a way. So let's just come to that realization. It doesn't matter. So am I
Mm-hmm.
stupid being in the security system in my home?
Oh no.
Exactly. So we can't go for what is happening because they decided to put all these safeguards in place to curtail gun
Mm-hmm.
violence. It's the people who are making it easy for the criminals to access the guns. Let's about
I'll
that.
say,
So if we have a
yeah, yeah.
like you said, where there is state by state, local government, whatever it is, but make it freedom is free. Yes. People fought for our freedom. We have the freedom of the Second Amendment. You are entitled to have a gun. Great. We understand that.
Mm-hmm.
However, your background also has to show us that we can trust you with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And the history following that can show that we can trust you with a gun. If a person breaks
Yeah.
into your home, even this law, I absolutely love it. If a person breaks into your home with their accomplice, if you're defending your home and in defending your home, the accomplice gets shot, whether critically or whatever, or fatally, the accomplice is responsible for that. So it makes people think twice about going to commit a crime with somebody because at the end, if
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
person gets hurt, it's on me because we decided to invade this person's privacy. The person
Yeah.
defending their environment is not at fault because rightfully so, self-defense. But there
Mm-hmm.
are other states that have a law that you cannot shoot a fleeing person. If you shoot a you're at
Mm-hmm.
fault. That is considered murder or
Yeah.
manslaughter depending on the state. So is that fair that somebody came into my house just because we talked about brandishing? I brandished a weapon and the process of
Mm-hmm.
stabbing my wife, but because they see a gun, they run away and I'm shooting or my husband or my child. They run. Then what?
Yeah.
I'm at fault.
Mm-hmm.
So if I shoot them at fault just because I shot them from the back, if they were running away, go, they were running.
Yeah.
So
Oh
it's
yeah.
kind of like there are a lot of nuances that needs dissecting. But in any case, places that enact strict gun laws are not to be blamed for the gun violence that are being committed, most likely with illegally obtained weapon. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
claim my house,
Mm-hmm.
then you throw mud in my house and blame me for the mud in my house. That is
Yeah.
reality.
I would say my argument against that, I guess, way of thinking of how these criminals are getting guns would be my argument against prohibition in general. So let's take prohibition with alcohol,
Right,
or actually prohibition of anything. Let's say drugs,
right,
alcohol, and firearms. Regardless on if it's illegal or not, if people want it, people will get it off the black
yep,
market, or a market will be created for a
right,
product that is deemed illegal. What this tells me is, regardless so you got Chicago here and you got Indiana here. Maybe Indiana has different gun laws.
right.
I don't know exactly what they are, or even Missouri. Let's say Missouri had strict gun laws too, and so did Indiana. Let's say Chicago didn't have
Well,
any
let's say
states
Florida.
around it.
Florida has little to nothing.
Okay,
Let's say Florida.
exactly. Let's use Florida. So let's say every other state had strict gun laws except Florida. I bet you people in Chicago would still find a way to get them from Florida to Chicago the same way they find how to get cocaine from Colombia to Chicago. So I don't think the argument is at fault for other states.
So you don't have to bet a lot of money because that's what's happening. Don't worry about betting. All right, that's basically his mission in a sense. Because when we're talking about prohibition, is zero sum. That's prohibition. No, we don't want any. Restriction is not prohibition. Restriction makes it responsible. You gotta be responsible. Okay. Prohibition is like you can't have it at all. That's
Hmm.
when the bootlegging, when we're talking about alcohol, bootlegging of alcohol, people died from people not producing it and getting poisoned. They wanted
Yeah.
their hands on alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
right?
The government was actually responsible for that. They poisoned a lot of the alcohol during
Really?
Prohibition. Yes.
Ah,
That's a whole other thing. I'd look into that. Yeah, yeah. But I understand what you're saying. It's a slippery slope no matter how you dice it when it
right,
comes to the firearm issue. But I'll say,
right.
what laws aren't these neighboring states doing that could prohibit it? To purchase a gun in any state now, you don't just get handed the gun. You do have to still do background checks. You still have to do all these things.
Not all of them. We mentioned Florida. Florida has very little to nothing. Florida is a very pro Second Amendment state, and so be it. To each his own. But background checks are not one of those standards in Florida specifically. And I think over this summer they have, what is that called again? There's a name for it, where there are no taxes and that is offered on gun and ammunition purchase. So there are states that do not require. So when we're talking about strict, let's break strict down, because it sounds almost prohibitionary the way that comes off. But a lot of this strictness is basically background check. Your background check will let me know if you have a criminal history. Your background check may or may not reflect mental health, whatever. My state asks specific questions, especially your mental health, especially about your career and occupation. There's certain things that you have to answer a certain way. And that back end stuff is done thoroughly. And it's something that you have to be squeaky, right? In order to. Not every state requires that. And people are always going to find the loophole. We're humans. Humans by design will always find an easier way to do things. That is part of why we are intelligent. We're always going to find a walk around something, because if we were just zombies, we'll just be following. We are not. We've evolved past just following and taking things at face value. We're always going to find a workaround. So not to applaud criminals, but hey, good for y'all. You figured a way. They're always going to figure a way. If a person really wants a way,
Which is why I'm against prohibition at all. But so with that mindset that criminals are always going to find a way,
right?
that's why I'm not necessarily a fan of stacking more gun control measures on top of the ones that most states already have, because that's only going to make it harder for the average person to obtain a gun. And I know with a lot of states, you have to pay fees, you have to pay extra taxes, you have to pay all these things for tax ammunition, all these different fees that for a poor person that maybe lives in a dangerous area, that is a law abiding citizen, that wants to protect themselves, like the Second Amendment guarantees, eventually can't afford to do so anymore because so many regulations get stacked against their favor. Now, you could say, oh, it's to help against the criminals, but like you
The
said,
criminals can.
they're always going to
The
find a
criminals
way.
can afford it.
Yeah, yeah. So we could talk about the gun control thing all day, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the only question really is how do we ensure freedom for citizens to protect themselves and also protect the citizens from that freedom?
That's a mouthful, but I think we're free enough, and we have so many things to protect ourselves that more guns is not the answer. I don't think more guns is the answer. If a person really wants to own a gun, let them own a gun and let them show that they're responsible enough to own a gun. And the extra burden of taxes and the extra stuff that you're mentioning, I am not quite aware of the extra stuff that is added other than paying. Everything in America is taxed. You buy your gun, you pay the taxes on it. You buy your ammunition, you pay the taxes on it. The extra levies mentioned, I'm not aware, so I can't speak to that. But I don't think the answer to anything, our freedom is guns and more guns. I don't believe that. Guns, yes, should be owned responsibly, and it should be owned in a way that proves that the owner can use it effectively, or in a way that protects himself, herself, and their families. That is my thought on that. We don't need more guns. And we don't need more guns circulating. It doesn't matter how many guns you have. You can either only shoot one at a time or two at a time. If you're that good of a man, smart woman. So do you. Whatever works for you. But in the case of gun control in the sense of responsible gun ownership? The answer to that is really, you talked about not liking, like it comes down to, regulation speaking with one voice, unfortunately. When it comes to who gets or who's responsible or who does what, maybe that can go down to the state level of making that decision. But if we're not speaking with the same voice, if each state can decide, okay, it is candy, everybody can have it, and others are like, this is kind of like dangerous candy, so responsible people should have it, there's never going to be a balance of responsibility.
No, there really isn't going to be a balance. I mean, this has been a debate for so many years now, and
It's very political.
like I said before,
I don't
oh
believe it
yeah,
should be. If the Second Amendment is there, there shouldn't be an argument about it. How There are people,
mm-hmm,
like you mentioned, that the Second Amendment was there because of when that Second Amendment was put in place because of farmers and the need to protect against whatever. I get that. I understand that. However, the landscape has changed. And people now, as opposed to protecting themselves against wild animals, have to protect themselves against fellow humans. That landscape has changed. Does it mean we adjust that? Maybe. But if we are not having the same aspect of communication when it comes to owning responsibly, we're always going to have the quote unquote illegal firearms in the street committing crimes and people
mm-hmm,
having access to firearms committing crimes against innocent children. That is the one that breaks my heart. Innocent children.
yeah,
If you want to go to war, enlist, and there are plenty of enemies that want to shoot at you, and you can shoot right back. And
no,
children,
yeah,
I mean, there's no excuse for that. Enough of the thoughts and prayers. Enough of that. It is tiring.
mm-hmm,
Innocent children deserve to just go to school and come back home safely. People deserve to
yeah,
walk the street any time of the day or night without fearing somebody robbing them at gunpoint or even killing them for their own personal property.
mhm,
So
yeah,
thoughts and prayers is nothing. I think enough of that nonsense.
no.
It's gotten so politicized that we forget the premise of keeping one another safe. We've
Mm-hmm.
forgotten.
Community, I think, is the biggest thing. Being involved, and there's tons of different ways you could slice it. And unfortunately, firearms in the hands of society, there will be
Yeah.
tragedies one way or another. But without firearms in the hands of citizens, there could be genocides. There's two different sides of evil to that coin, and that's happened throughout history. That's happened in China. That's happened in South America, where citizens' rights to protect themselves are removed and millions are killed, as opposed to, unfortunately, schools being shut up. So that's another way that it can be looked at. And you could say, hey, that's an old way of thinking, or that would never happen in America. But it absolutely could if guns did not exist in the hands of the public. A tyrannical politician takes charge. They could do whatever they would like with those laws. And if it's legal, the government, will justify it. So that's one thing I would say to caution about. And also, with schools, hire veterans to protect these children. Put them at the front door of the school. I know tons of buddies of mine who I served with who would love the opportunity to work a job, even paying minimum wage, where they could protect children from potential threats. This wouldn't break our country financially, especially with us sending billions overseas. Instead of sending billions overseas, let's spend billions here hiring veterans, giving veterans jobs, protecting our children from would-be criminals. There's multiple ways you could slice it, but at the end of the day, I don't think a disarmed society would ever be a good thing.
I don't think that is the premise at all. I don't think anybody's asking for a disarmed society, however, a regulation of responsibility. It's never been a
Oh yeah.
conversation. There are a lot of people across the aisle, the political aisle that are gun owners. It's about responsibility. And I think as a society or as a country, I cringe at the thought of our children being guarded at school. If we have come
I
to
I
that
do too.
point, that is not good.
Question is, what is the alternative?
Responsible gun ownership. That is very simple.
Okay, so what does that
Is
mean?
making sure a proper background check is done. Is making that.
I'm pretty sure
One,
Florida
no,
does.
look it up. You can look it up. Let's not get hung up on Florida. Florida is Florida. Florida is Florida's
Well, Texas is Texas, but Texas also has background checks as well, and they're very pro-gun.
okay. So great, beautiful. It's about responsibility. It's not about how many you have.
Training. Could we call it training?
No, it's not training. Because let's look at the school shootings. They were committed by what? These were not career criminals. If you dissect the school shooting, crimes committed by young children, young children who had a
Oh, yeah.
degree of disturbance, but
And they had
right,
access
that's
to
what I'm saying,
firearms.
is the access.
There.
It's the responsibility. If
Okay.
I was a parent who is responsible for my guns and I secure it
Mm-hmm.
the way I'm supposed to secure it, and I start seeing red
Mm-hmm.
flags with my child, we're
Oh,
going to make
yeah.
sure they get
Oh,
the
yeah.
help they need, as opposed to wait until afterwards.
Okay.
In one of those cases, the parents actually did raise an alarm, but the law enforcement did not take things very seriously. If a kid
Mm.
has a problem, they have a problem. It's time for us to take
Mm-hmm.
things seriously. If I have a loved one, a family member, a friend, a neighbor who has questionable judgment, it is my responsibility to make sure they don't have access to firearm. And if they
Mm-hmm.
got firearm and passed background check and whatever, as a society, like I said, we need better mental health support because it's
Yes.
on the brink of having that mental health.
Mental break. Yeah.
That's what I'm
Crisis.
saying. When we don't see mental health crisis as a thing, it becomes an issue for the society at large.
I agree. And I think that's ultimately what it all boils down to is that mental health aspect. But when you're saying, I guess, responsible gun ownership, and we need laws that support that, what law would be enforceable that could benefit that? Because I'm open to it. I'm just curious what that might look like. Because, we say, oh, a parent needs to lock up their guns to prevent these school shootings. Okay, how do we enforce that without
You're
overstepping personal liberties?
criminalize them and take. If your family member was able to access your semi-automatic, okay, and went and committed a
Mm-hmm.
crime with that, you did not show me
Yes,
you are responsible. It's either you go to
I agree.
rehabilitation program, just like we do the
Mm-hmm.
alcoholics, or you lose your license.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a thing.
I agree. I agree, and I think there has been a precedent set with that with a lot of these school shootings where the parents have been charged for that. But what new additional laws could we do that could prevent that?
Okay, so were you trained in the army about guns?
Yes.
All right. How many people get a gun and decide, okay, maybe I'm not going to maybe a local range to get trained or get trained by somebody who knows how to handle this weapon? People should train. A
Uh,
lot of people are not trained. Okay. A lot of people are not trained. And that
mhm.
safety aspect along with that. Again, in our society, we need to take mental health seriously. We do not. Certain states do. Certain bodies, non-for-profit, for-profit companies, do offer services. Not every state has these establishments or resources for people.
Yeah. We should
Just
fund
think
it a
about
lot
funding.
more.
Yes, we should fund that as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
putting metal detectors or gun detectors in schools. It's supposed to be
Or
even
we
for
could even,
children. Come on, we're talking about kids.
yeah. I would say we could do both. I mean, I want my kids maximally protected, so I wouldn't mind having an armed guard, or at least being an armed guard doesn't mean you have to be standing there with an AR-15 on your chest. That can be
Yes,
concealed carry. He could wear a suit, he could wear a
like
suit jacket and walk around the school and look like
soldier
a
in a suit.
principal.
No, How we-
Oh yeah, a
they're
soldier
not
in a
going to be
suit.
comfortable. So now, what?
Oh no, they are. I used to work with a lot of armed security guys who work for
Yeah,
celebrities. They wear suits. President Biden, they actually walk around with a semi-automatic, actually
wow.
a fully automatic submachine gun inside
Oh,
their jacket, and they look like they're just a businessman. But my kid right now that goes to high school, they have a metal detector. They have to walk through every day, and they have multiple police on the school grounds that are just there to help out with any incidences because there's fights that happen. It might not be firearm related, there's fights. So I think increasing just security at school in general, whether it be through public police or private security, and paying for more mental health services in the
yeah.
state could help curb a lot of
Yeah.
these problems. And I know I don't like the state of Illinois' gun laws whatsoever. I don't think they allow normal citizens to do much where I live, but also they don't prevent a lot of crime. It's Illinois, Chicago. But I do know they do background checks. I know they do have a 3-day waiting period. If you want to buy a gun, you have to wait 3 days. They call it that cool
That
down period.
is, some states you wait months, you know?
Yeah, and I think it should, like you said earlier, though. I think it should be to the state's level, because just like with a lot of laws, if a state has a law you don't like, you are free to move to a different state.
Absolutely.
Now, whether you can do that financially is another argument, but I think it should be a state law. But I think the ability for a civilian to own firearm nationwide with the Second Amendment should remain. But then again, this is such a complicated topic.
It is.
There's really no good way to slice it.
It is. It is. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to require a lot of uniformity. It's going to require a lot of collective agreement. And right now, with lobbying and the governing bodies, I don't want to mention their names.
Hmm.
There's a lot of once money gets involved, the interest of the citizens kind of like takes a backseat. So,
Oh
um,
yeah.
it is a business at the end of the day. Yeah, it is a business, but in a general sense, we have got to come up with something that is going to work because we have seen society, yes, both sides of the coins where they're not armed and millions are killed, and we've seen they're not armed and change has been affected. It
Hmm.
just happened. Two countries. Gun is not number one, but the right decisions were made. The citizens came together and said, no, we don't want this for our country. But we don't have that here. We really don't. When people are vested in their own selfish interest and what they can benefit from whatever,
Mm,
regardless of how it affects their fellow citizens, it becomes a very divided society. And if this
yeah.
spirals into, like you said, like bloodshed, civil war, taking guns away, nobody's planning on doing that. But when it comes to people defending themselves, I think people who are avid gun owners, especially in states where it's very gun heavy, will be surprised at the people who own guns. Because when we think about gun ownership, there's a certain demographic of people. "Oh, what are you going to do? You're going to find me with a spoon." People think people are friends don't own guns. That is what kills me. The libertarians don't own guns. The Democrats only want peace. You'll be surprised. You'll be shocked. It's all
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
responsible gun ownership. And also there are people that are Republicans that don't agree with the free for all. So I think collectively we have different nuances of this conversation on what we agree on, but the fear and it's rooted in falsehood. People, nobody wants to take your guns. Stop it. Nobody wants it.
Oh
Your
yeah.
gun is your gun. Nobody's taking it.
I think some people do. Some people want to. It's impossible to do so though,
Whoever
from
has that idea, I've
the
never
numbers.
heard a sitting president say it. I've never heard it.
Not a sitting president. I've heard or people running for president say it as recently as this last election. They have said it.
No, I've not. I know even, I think Kamala even said it. She's a gun owner.
She said she's a gun owner. There's a clip. I'll send
I
you a
would
clip
like
of
to
her
see
saying it. I,
guns racing
I've shared it in
people.
the
No,
past.
maybe criminals, not upstanding citizens, people that are doing their very best. Even see, this is the shock people are in for. You think it is only your collection that owns guns and your people who think similar?
Oh no, I want everybody to own
Okay.
guns. I believe an armed minority is harder to oppress. Just like with women, they're harder to oppress when they're armed. An armed minority. No, I was going to say, in any marginalized group, if they feel like
Yeah,
they're in danger, take advantage of that
yeah,
Second Amendment. Protect yourself from that hate that's coming your direction.
yeah,
Don't allow yourself to be a victim.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I preach to everybody. No matter what group you're a part of, use the Second Amendment to your advantage.
yeah. I agree with that, but it's not always about that. Unfortunately, in the United States, as a woman, unfortunately, it has gone to that extent where you have to brandish something to be safe. especially if you're alone
Mhm.
at nighttime.
Mhm. I can't imagine what that would be like, you know what I mean? And that's scary. That's
It
really,
is,
really
yes.
scary.
Even the commonest thing as pepper spray. Pepper spray is illegal in some states.
Mm,
I think the state of New York is illegal to own a pepper spray. And there's a lot of crimes that get committed, especially in New York City itself. And then you have a state like New Jersey that is right next door, and you can walk around with a pepper spray. Especially it's a deterrent.
mhm.
It keeps somebody, it actually gives you an opportunity to run if you have to, right? To safety. We're talking about things like that. It's not always about the weapon. I think we have become, as a society, become so dependent on a gun that we forget the human strength, the unity we have.
Yeah.
You're going to come, oh, you
Mhm.
people. We forget that the unity is far stronger than
Yeah.
that gun. Even for women, women have a
Mhm.
way of moving society towards saving it from itself. Men are always going to lead with their egos, and we love you guys for that. You're going to always lead with that, and we love you guys for that. You do serve your purpose in that arena. However, everything doesn't require all of us. So we
Yeah.
forget what we as humans have together. When we move together, we move well. Again, societies have shown us, even in this very weird times in our country, other societies have shown us what unity can bring. They didn't have, they didn't
Mhm.
say, come and get it. Nobody said any of that. Everybody
Yeah.
kind of like looked around and said, this is not what we want. It divides us. It does this. We don't want this at all. We want a society that functions for everybody. And they went forward and got that.
Mhm.
Again, America does not have that. Does not have that. That is why we continue to have this heavy divide. Everybody's not going to have the same mindset. Everybody's not going to think the same way. Everybody's not going to have the same values. We have to celebrate the differences that is us. However, we have sunken to a place that we highlight the differences rather than the similarities that we share. And the similarities far
I
outweigh the
agree.
differences. You and got on, and
Mhm.
we've been talking for quite a bit, but we've had a great time. We've had,
I think so, yeah.
even before we got on this call, we had a great time. My dark sense of humor, you laughed. I'm like, yeah, oh my God. There's so much that unites us, that divides us, but we focus on the divide rather than what brings us together.
Mhm.
In a society that was sinking deep into, it may be illegal for you and I to have this conversation. Maybe because of where you live, where I live. Maybe because of the way that I look, the way that you look. Maybe because of my gender and your gender. Is that something that is going to be enjoyable? No, I don't want that. I want to be able to relate to people, different people. Again, you enjoy going on people's because you don't want
Mhm.
to have yours, Gary. What if that is compromised? Is that something that is going to affect you?
Yeah.
We don't think on that level most times. Is all about me, me. Is a society that has become very
Mhm.
selfish, that we don't think about the general good or bad our ambition, our passion has on us. And
Mhm.
it's sad, quite.
It's a balancing act. It really is, and it requires emotional intelligence to differentiate your passions versus other people's. And I think being open to hearing other discussions and also applying what you learn
Yeah,
from other people and looking inward from their point of view can really help you shape your viewpoints going forward, or at the very least understand how your viewpoints might be seen by others to maybe help you change your approach and maybe even at least how you talk to somebody. You know, that can be the biggest thing. How do you come at somebody? How do you approach them? Are they feeling defensive? Or are they understanding that, hey, this person actually wants to know what I think,
right.
as opposed to just gonna tell them what I think.
And that has become us lately. That has become us. We don't
Yeah.
converse. We shout our opinions at people. And you must see it my way. And that
Mhm.
we don't converse. We don't have this conversation. You have your view on things.
Mhm.
And yes, they're valid. I may not agree with everything. And this is why I don't agree with everything. And we have had this
Mhm.
conversation going back and forth, respecting each other, laughing in between. We've lost as a
Yeah.
society. We really have. Is a
Hmm.
battle. It's either
Well,
you're on my side or you forget it.
hopefully somebody will watch this and learn something from it. Somebody will see us talking and they'll be like, wait a minute, they're having a good time still. Maybe I can have this same conversation with that so and so that believes differently.
Right. And it will help us to respect each other more because we've been too married to the fact that we are right. Our side is right. Our opinion is the only
Yeah,
opinion and the one that should. No. Your opinion is your opinion. I don't have to agree with it, but I can respect it as much as you can also respect my opinion and see how certain things affect me, as I can see how certain things affect you. Sometimes it's us reading into things rather than seeing things for what they are just because that one thing we don't agree with. It's always that one thing
yep,
we
yep.
don't agree with. So it's just like you and I were talking about the whole taking guns away from people. I haven't heard one person say they're taking guns away from people. I have heard responsible gun ownership. You and I have talked about somebody not being responsible with their guns, your guns being used to commit a crime, especially against children. Maybe you should lose access to those guns. Maybe you should lose your license and work your
Absolutely.
way back to showing that you can be responsible. We do this with drug addicts all the time.
Hmm.
We do this with people.
Rehabilitation.
My goodness, look at that. It's part of the human experience. How many times as a kid have you done something,
Hmm.
been reprimanded for it, and then have to prove yourself in order to get that back? How many
Hmm.
of us adults in the workplace have had performance improvement plans implemented where you have to prove yourself again?
Yeah,
So why do we stop in only structured environment? It's part of the experience. You're
yeah.
going to falter. You're going to do things that may not be all the way agreeable or useful to everybody. However, you should be given a chance to prove yourself, show that you've learned. So many people would
Hmm.
not be rehabbed today if we had a zero sum approach to things. You're done, you're done.
Correct. Yeah.
Absolutely. The people who run with the wrong crowd as kids. However, in the adulthood, they're like, you know what? No, this is not what I want for myself. I want to be a productive member of the
Hmm.
society. They've come out from either jail or whatever, gone to school, got a degree, having thriving careers today. Should they not have an opportunity to own a gun?
Hmm.
Exactly. The people that have had an accident, either drunk driving or whatever. They've lost their license. You know, maybe they had so many points on it over time. They've lost their license, but they have to show. Some people have breathalyzers out in
Hmm.
their car where they have to blow into it before the car starts. And after a certain period of time, when you're trusted, that is removed. That is rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So common sense like this can be implemented, especially with guns. It's a weapon that can cause a lot of damage, take lives, especially when we're talking about the semi-automatic and automatic weapons, which you don't need time to shoot and recoil. He does multiple things at a time.
Hmm.
This soapbox is tiring.
No, I agree. We could probably have multiple episodes exploring
I
different
tell you.
aspects of
Yeah.
the gun
Well, I
debate for
mean, this was
sure.
healthy one.
I think so, and I think it's a topic more people should talk about. It needs to be explored more. It needs to be discussed more.
Yes.
Because I hate seeing tragedies happen, but also at the same time, I hate seeing freedoms taken away. So we have to strike a balance.
We have,
Somewhere in between
yes.
is a balance.
Yes, I agree. People have to feel secure that they are owning guns rightfully and that there's no risk of them losing that right if they haven't committed a crime. And people all to know
Hmm.
that there's a responsibility to it. That if you commit a crime or if you have, a history of committing crimes, violent crimes on that, there is a need for you to show that you've changed your ways.
Yeah.
Yes, we all have a duty to society. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our families, we owe it to our society to make it healthy. And it's going to take a group effort. Unfortunately, this is a
It really is.
group project. Not everybody's contributing equally.
No, they're not.
So I don't like group projects. This was a great conversation, Gary. Absolutely loved it. I did.
I enjoyed it too.
Thank you, Gary. I usually ask my guests. Mostly I talk this time, Gary. You let me talk, sir. You're supposed to be my guest. So usually I ask for a few nuggets, golden nuggets from my guests as we wrap up the conversation. So is there or are there some nuggets that you are looking to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I would say all things in life, one of my favorite sayings would be if you fail to prepare, you're
Mm,
preparing to fail. So in all things, do a little preparing. Think about where you're going, whether it be for safety's sake or if you're going into a job interview, prepare for it. Putting in that little bit of effort really can set you apart between failure and success. So definitely prepare or prepare to fail.
love it. Prepare for anything. Your get back home bag, that's preparation. Set
hmm
yourself up where you want to see yourself in the future. Start now.
Another nugget I have would be luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I don't know who said that before, but a lot of people in my life have called me lucky for one reason or another. And in certain instances, that's absolutely correct. But more often than not, it's when your preparation beforehand meets an opportunity and then it creates luck. But a lot of people don't do that preparation before. So when that opportunity arises, they can't
I love
capitalize on
it.
it.
So, for your current career, your preparation in the military, operating drones, you think that prepared you for this opportunity?
It prepared me for the opportunity, which enabled me to be successful in it. So, yes.
So, at any point, did that cross your mind that there could possibly be a career behind us? The reason I'm asking that is the immediate gratification era that we're in. And people
Mm,
do think when it's not successful, it doesn't yield results right away, they become discouraged.
hmm
Was there any time that crossed your mind that one day I will be working for and specifically focus on drone, or that opportunity to learn presented itself, you took it and here you are?
No, there was no thought of me doing it in the future at the time. I call myself a jack of all trades and a master of none, because I like to be a Swiss Army
Nice.
knife of knowledge. I don't just want to be that one expert in one field. I want to be as well-rounded as I can possibly be. And I value experience over
Yeah.
anything. I like to vision whenever I'm on my deathbed, I want to look back at the wide range of things that I've got to do in my life, as opposed to me being a financial expert on Wall Street. I don't want to look back at my life and say, I traded stocks and I made millions. No. I want to say I jumped out of airplanes, I flew drones, I shot guns, I did podcasts, I did all this stuff. Because for me, that's a well rounded, fulfilled life. And that's kind of what I do everything with.
Nice. I like that. And I have that mindset as well. So I have my hands in multiple things. And that's saying jack of all trades, master of none. You know, that's not the end of it, right?
Yeah, I've heard the rest of it, but I can't remember it. But that's the part I always use.
Yeah, it's jack of all trade, master of none, still better than a master of one.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think I'm a master of one. So jack of all trade, master of none, still better than a master of one. So yeah, that goes right into
hmm
what you said about being trading all the stocks and it makes money. Don't get us wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But diversifying knowledge is something that I really admire and is something that I do. So please, ladies and gentlemen, there's a thing that loved ones like to do. When you want to do something else, but you're already good at this. You already do this. Why bother? Go for it. If you feel you need to diversify your
hmm
knowledge, go for it. Learn that new skill, learn that new thing, and make yourself happy because at the end of the day, is your life. Um, Gary,
hmm
this was such a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me
Oh my
on.
God. Thank everybody for listening. We hope you got something from this conversation, at least one thing. Let us know what you think. Opinions and they're welcome wherever you may stand on this several conversations that we had. It is going to be respected. And thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. Thank you, Gary, for being here.
Thank you. You have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Unshelling Medicine Podcast. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Altruistic Scribe on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We share additional tips, updates, and health-related content that you won't want to miss. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us at altruisticscribeco.com. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and tackle the health topics that matter most to you. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.